Good morning. Thanks very much for coming in. I'm checking my screen down here, but I'm gonna try to focus on the camera while we're talking today. Today we're gonna look at Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, and let's flip over there real quick. This is a picture of Carlos and Ichiro, and the whole diorama I've got on the bench here. Let me see if I can get over there. Here's the diorama on the bench. It's a little bit hard to show, but I've got a whole bunch of pictures that I can go through and I've set up here. Nothing very sophisticated, but I think it's going to get across really what we're trying to talk about. And that is really the build, how I built it, and some of the things that went into it, some of the reasons why I came up with such a rich story behind it. And I also want to tell the story behind Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, because when I build a diorama, I think about a story. Now, I don't write out anything ahead of time. As a matter of fact, I haven't even written out the entire story yet, but I have an idea of what I want to do. And through building the diorama, I'll get ideas and I'll get new sections I want to build, and it'll develop on its own very organically. I don't completely plan out my dioramas, but sometimes a story takes hold and that story guides the building of the diorama. So the elements that I put in, where I put things, the color, everything about it becomes a part of that narrative story that I build in my head. In this instance, with Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, it was about a 9-month build or so, if I remember properly. And over that time, I was able to create this story that to me was really deep. And I really enjoyed it. And it made building the diorama and adding the different elements in the diorama really important, because I was trying to fulfill this story that I had in my head. And so what we're looking at right now are just some pictures that my friend John Robeck put together. They're AI generated using some of the things that I have. But what I really like about them is they do illustrate some of the three main factors of the story. And so that's kind of what we're also going to talk about. And then I have pictures here. Let me get back to that. I've got pictures here of the entire build. I'm going to go and we'll start with Carlos, which is a Machinen Krieger model that I received as a gift, and from Stephen Robbins. And then I started building it, and it just opened up this entire world for me. So I was really happy to do it. I was trying to remember who gave it to me, because since then I've gotten a couple more from other people. So I'm going to dive in now. The other thing about this is it's meant to be very interactive. I want to answer any questions you might have. I want to go in a direction that shows you the build somewhat in order, but I want to make sure that you're getting out of this what you would like to get out of it, about the build, about the story, about the method that I use in utilizing a story to guide the build of a diorama, the whole thing. So as I go through here, I will be checking on the comments and your comments. I'll interrupt the story and we'll look at that. So first off here, let's go ahead and look at the entire diorama. And I've got that here, right here. The diorama is set on an alien world, and it's a world that is being colonized by colonizers, people that are setting out. And that's how this whole thing begins. So when I look at these pictures that John Robeck created, it shows a very large ship in orbit around, or above in orbit around this planet. And so what happened was, as they got to this distant planet on the fringes of the solar system, they get woken up and they're deorbiting. It's supposed to go into orbit and stay in orbit, and this large ship basically stays in orbit. And as you see in the picture here, there's a little drop ship down below. Well, that drop ship, what that is supposed to do is come down to the surface. It provides this couple, Emma and Carlos, with everything that they'll need to set up a homestead on this barren planet. And that dropship contains everything that they'll need for 5 years. And in 5 years, if it doesn't go well, they have the option of going back up to this ship that's still in orbit, and they can head home just in case. It's like a safety measure. Now, the dropship, as it's orbiting the planet, also becomes their satellite and their communications. They can bounce up to it, talk to each other if one's away from their habitat. And so that's a very key component. Also, they have the ability of bringing more supplies down if they need. So as they're, making their destination, they're in some sort of stasis. They get to the planet, they go into orbit, but they get woken up and there's been a problem. The ship is starting to self-destruct and it's starting to deorbit. It's starting to fall into the atmosphere. And so they very quickly have to make a decision. And what they do is that little orange drop ship on the bottom, they drop that drop ship, and that drop ship goes down. And because it wasn't planned, Emma goes in it, but Carlos can't make it. So he stays with the orbiting ship that's deorbiting, and Emma goes down, crash lands. So Emma is on her own. Then Carlos basically rides the crashing, what's supposed to be orbiting that ship, which is not meant to land. He crashes in with it. So Carlos, at that point, and let's go back to a picture of Carlos. Carlos, he's a miner. In this story, in this narrative, basically Carlos seeds planets so that they will terraform. In mining operations, they have all of this waste, this mining waste. And so what his job is he's basically an interstellar trucker. He will take all this waste from the mining operations and he'll go dump that onto small planets that they deem capable of supporting life if they're terraformed. So what Carlos does is he goes around to all these different planets, and after so many years, certain planets build up enough of these minerals and this waste material and stuff like that, that it starts to self create an atmosphere. Very thin, but an atmosphere. Now, you notice in this picture, Carlos is in a suit. That is a Machinen Krieger suit. That Machinen Krieger Racoon suit allows him to do work in a very, very thin atmosphere on these planets. And so he has that aboard the mothership that's crashing in. As it crashes in, it almost kills Carlos. So Carlos goes down with the ship. It's never meant to land, so it crashes, and Carlos is almost killed. As he sits there, he does survive. It's important that he can go ahead and try and find where Emma is. But because Emma was basically ejected before in the dropship, before they were able to get to their proper destination, stuff like that, he doesn't know where she is. There's only a little beacon that's going off that he can see in some of his telemetry and all his electronics and all that kind of jazz. So with this destroyed ship, there's nothing, there are supplies, but there's nothing that, like a vehicle or anything like that, that he can use to fly around to find where Emma is. So what he does is he takes some of these materials and he builds basically something that will help him support his life while he looks for Emma on this desolate planet, following this beacon. Now, in doing so, and I'm going to go to a different set of pictures here. In doing so, what he does is he creates what is called a travois. It's either a travois or a travois. You know, in the West, or even during when they were settling, moving west, and even the native Indians, native people in North America, they would take, two sticks, tie them together, and pull them behind a horse, or they would pull them themselves, and that's called a travois. So what Carlos does is he builds his own little travois. Now I'm going to go to a little bit more finished picture of Ichiro here, so you can see what he looks like. So this is the travois that Carlos builds. Now it's motorized, and how he does that is here. He takes a machine, because of course when they're planning, to colonize, they have some things that they want to bring, that they're kind of personal items. Well, what Carlos brings is a pitching machine, a baseball pitching machine, because he loves baseball. And he thought that would be kind of a fun thing to have, something to kind of kill time in the quiet hours. But it's, of course, destroyed in the crash. But what he does is he takes the remnants of that baseball pitching machine and creates the motorized portion of the travois. Then what he does is he takes the AI components out of the mothership, and he implants them into this little motorized travois. And the travois itself, being built out of a pitching machine, it doesn't really have a memory. And the memory for the AI was destroyed in the crash. But the AI element itself still works. So the memory in the pitching machine is only baseball, because it's a pitching machine. And so the only memory that the AI has is the complete and entire history of baseball up until that point, because they did come from Earth. So as he builds this and he hooks up this machine, it becomes sentient. But again, its memory only has baseball. And so what Carlos begins to do is he begins to teach his travois how to communicate and how to work with him on their journey to find Emma. So in that, one of the things that happens on this long journey, this very long journey that they're traveling on, it actually takes Carlos and Ichiro 4 years to reach Emma. But on that journey, I'm trying to find a better picture. Along that journey, and again, Ichiro didn't have a name initially, but Ichiro Suzuki became Ichiro's favorite baseball player throughout the entire history of baseball. He just focused on Ichiro. And if I'm trying to find a picture here, on the side of Ichiro here, there was a number 1. And so that's, from Ichi, Japanese number 1. That's where Ichiro came out. I can't find a picture of the number 1. Oh, you can kind of see it there. There's a number 1 right there on the fuel tank of Ichiro. And so that's how he got the name Ichiro. So now on this 4-year journey that Carlos and Ichiro are on, Ichiro basically becomes like Carlos's son. Now, I don't want to get into any of the deep things about, AI and human blah, blah, blah. It's just, that's in the story. He basically becomes his son, and he speaks to him like his son, and he's trying to teach him about the world and about life, and to have a better and deeper understanding about humans, why they're there, what they're going to do, who Emma is, his wife, And so that happens along that 4-year journey in trying to find Emma. Now, why is it a 4-year journey? Well, when they eject the ship and the ship comes down with Emma, the landing ship, it destroys its communication equipment, and it also needed the satellite, the mothership that was supposed to stay in orbit. It needed that to bounce signals off to get to anybody that's trying to communicate with their homestead. But because that ship's not there, he can't communicate. But he does have a beacon, so he's got this very weak beacon that Ichiro can, say, hey, it's in this direction. And so they're looking. But because the ship went down at this place on the planet, and then the mothership continued to go, it's basically this massive, great distance, and it takes Ichiro and Carlos 4 years to go ahead and get to that homestead, which he finally does. And that's basically where we're at in the diorama as the diorama is built. So I'll switch here and show you. There's the diorama. So this is the built up, but also kind of destroyed habitat that was built up. And here's Ichiro right here. And I've got other pictures to show you. And then here's Carlos. And they're coming up on this dome that's partially buried with sand and stuff like that. And they're trying to see, what happened to Emma, because they don't see Emma. They can't communicate. As they get closer, they should be able to communicate. They can't communicate with Emma, but they find this. And so they're just getting there in the diorama as it's presented in the final diorama. So what happened to Emma? Well, Emma, I need to go here real quick. I'm trying to get to this. So what happened to Emma as she crash landed? See if you can get that picture. As she crash landed, she was also injured, but she was not injured as dire as Carlos was initially. Carlos actually was down for a few months trying to heal and trying to build Ichiro and trying to scavenge and trying to figure out what to do and stuff from the mothership. But Emma, when she landed, she had the entire drop vehicle at her disposal to build their habitat, their homestead on this planet. And so this picture shows Emma starting to build the habitat. Now, the habitat is basically self-building, but it requires 2 people and someone even with a the suit, the Machinen Krieger suit that Carlos is in. It requires that for some of the heavy lifting and stuff like that. So Emma has this incredible journey over years to build this habitat, on her own. She has no help. She doesn't have an Ichiro. She only has the tools that she has, which are not quite enough to build this habitat. So she goes through this incredible journey of building the habitat on her own and getting it up to speed. Now, a little bit about Emma. Emma is a biologist, and they met on Carlos and Emma met because Emma was finishing her doctorate. She has 3 doctorates. I don't know the other 2, but she's super smart, highly intelligent. But biology was her primary thing. And so what she was going to do is utilize her scientific background to go ahead and help them farm on this desolate landscape. And so that's why the domes. So in building this, she's first putting up a dome to get in out of the very, very thin atmosphere. You can basically breathe, but not for long without assistance. So when you're on this planet, the atmosphere is so thin, it's like being on the top of Everest. You need oxygen to go ahead and do anything. So she's building this, and her plan is to go ahead and use the chemicals and the chemistry that she understands to go ahead and make plant life and food grow, which was the whole plan of them homesteading on this planet. And so that is her purpose. And so she begins that process by herself. She doesn't know if Carlos is alive. She has no idea what happened to the dropship. She's just praying that something has happened so that someday possibly she can be reunited with Carlos. So Emma goes through this journey. And on this journey, she gets the habitat built. She's able to get her hydroponics, which is in here, working. And it's working somewhat well. But on the planet, with its thin atmosphere, there was a massive storm. And these storms are basically, solar, whatever, meteorites, something coming down and destroys part of the habitat. And that's what you see in the diorama. The habitat is partially destroyed. We only see a portion of it, just almost a cutout of it, but it's been partially destroyed. So what that does is that kills the hydroponics that she has in it. And we're going to look at all the build of these individual elements as we go forward. I hope this story is okay. It's not, driving you mad. But the hydroponics get destroyed, and then Emma escapes into this chamber inside. There's a airlock right here, that door, and then there's a window there, and she escapes in there just barely because there's not enough atmosphere there. And then she goes into an airtight chamber and goes into stasis. She freezes herself, basically, not knowing if Carlos is alive, not knowing if she's ever going to be rescued, but it's her only chance to survive. And so she goes into there. Now, when she goes into there, she goes into a deep freeze. And the elements then start to come into the break in the dome, and it's partially underground, as you can see. Here's the surface. But this partially underground area, what happens is the chemicals and the things that she's introduced for her hydroponics, and I'll show you some more of that. You can't see it here in the picture, but there's a lot more to look at in the build. What happens is it starts to mix with some of the elements in, on the planet. And what happens is new life begins to grow. And that's what's happening here. Sorry. Here in the dome. This is life that has not existed anywhere else in the universe. It's because of the mix of the atmosphere, all the chemicals and minerals and stuff that Carlos brought to this planet, and other, shippers and droppers and stuff like that, the people that build these planets. And it builds new life. And so that's what this is supposed to represent. It's green because it's getting sunlight, and down here you can see the chemicals, and we'll get there so you can see that, starts to show or starts to allow this life to be grown. So it's actually working. Her biology and her chemistry is actually working to bring life to this planet. So that's, and then as it happens, Carlos and Ichiro arrive, and they find it in this state, and they eventually do find Emma inside this airlock, and she's frozen, and they're joined. So that is basically the story behind, and there's a lot more depth on that 4-year journey. Carlos has 2 encounters with people. One is very negative, one is not so bad. But he has a real big choice to make, and there's a lot of drama in that. And the reason I wanted to tell you the story is I'm very passionate about the story. The story drove the ideas to build the diorama, and the depth of the story is something that I thought about as I was building each element, as I was trying to think about the diorama's direction. what am I going to use to inspire me to, number one, keep going on such a long build, a 9-month build? Um, and it was really that narrative, that story that I kept telling myself in my head and refining and updating and adding different parts to during the build that helped me build, for me, a very enjoyable diorama. You know, when I look at this, Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, I think of three people, if you will, a family in a, you know, in a desolate place. It's I think a lot of it is based on like Firefly, because I love the TV series Firefly. Um, that kind of a Western, moving out, you know, making your own way, homesteading, trying to build a life, all that kind of thing. I love that kind of drama. Um, and that's a lot of the ideas that mold through my head as I'm you know, building the diorama. I think that that's a real important thing about building your diorama, having a story, even if you're not going to tell somebody the story, even if you're not going to illustrate the story, but having a story in your head that gives you that direction, that gives you the ability to go ahead and fill in those gaps of detail. Why is that there? I think every single thing that's in your diorama needs to have a reason. It has to be something that either you can explain or someone viewing it can discover. If somebody's interested and you're there and you can talk to them about it, then you can talk about it. And then the story is what engages somebody with what you've built in your diorama. I see a lot of dioramas at shows that are built, and and I've said this many times, it's a representation of your skill. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's wonderful. You know, it's the old tank on a plank, right? You've got this very, very small um, surface that you put your tank on, or your vehicle, or your aircraft. And it's just a setting. It just gives it some grounding. It gives it a place to be. But once you look at it and once you interpret that as a viewer, that's pretty much it. Now, if you are a builder and you're someone who's very interested in someone's skill, or how someone has progressed at modeling, then that may be enough. But what if you're new to model building? What if you're not a model builder? What if you're there to see something that's intriguing? I think having a story in a diorama helps convey a message. It gives someone something to latch onto, to not only enjoy what they're looking at, but to look further into what you're building. Now, the story may not be apparent. Everything that I, you know, talked about this morning is not here. I mean, it is all here because I know it, but that doesn't mean that someone observing this has to know that whole story. If I know the story as I'm building, there's just things that I'll do in building that will help illustrate a connection between characters, a connection with the characters and the place, a connection with the place and the other things that are happening. It basically makes it more interesting. Again, even if they don't know the story, they'll be able to make these connections. And I think that helps drive engagement for someone looking at a diorama. And that's really what you want, right? You spend months, weeks maybe, but months in my case, building this, and you want to show the effort. You want people to recognize something. For me, it's not necessarily my build skill, you know, how good I am at painting or how good I am at this or that. It's the story. It's that element that is going to take you a little bit further than just, wow, I saw this really cool plane. Nothing wrong with that. If it's the best plane you've ever seen or whatever, you're probably going to remember it. But if there's a narrative that can be somehow given through the placement and the coordination of the different pieces in your diorama, I think someone's going to, remember that much, much more. So that's why I like to build these stories, and I think the stories drive the build so that they're a little bit more complete. Because I get that question a lot. Folks ask, well, what sets your diorama apart, or how do you think of the detail, or how did you get that much detail in there? It's not that I planned on putting this part or that model or this widget in there. That's not the point. The point is the story needed that element or that part or that model to be a complete story. And by looking at it that way, I think you're going to find when you're building your diorama that the story helps you fill in those details just by, the fact that if it's not there, the story can't be told. This narrative won't flow without that little bit in there. That little thing needs to be there so that the story can be followed. And that's really ultimately what I want. I want people to be able to discover the story or even make up their own story because of the details that I put in the diorama. So that was an awful lot about the story and the narrative and all that kind of stuff. Now I kind of want to move to the build and show you some of those details that I did add and how I built this. Okay. I am going to look at some questions here and hopefully there's some. John Hayes says, have you used fiber optic lighting? I have not, John. That is something that you asked one time before, and I have some, and I want to use it because, growing up, I would get Fangoria and Starlog and, all these cool, sci-fi magazines, stuff like that. And that's what they used. We didn't have these little tiny LEDs when I was growing up. It was all fiber optic and, the ships and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to do it. And I've got a friend in, locally that builds models, and he's done it, and it's amazing. Well, a few friends that have done it, and it's amazing. There's a difference with using an LED and using, fiber optic. You can get such precise lighting and minute, especially when you're doing something like a ship or something like that, something big, especially a spaceship, to get that little tiny bit of light in there. I'd love to do that. I know the process. I have a little bit of fiber optic. I've not used it yet, but that is something that I'd love to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start where I started on this, which was Carlos. So I'm going to show you pictures now of building Carlos and talk you through that, because if you haven't built a Machinen Krieger, there's a few things about it. Number one, the plastic is very durable. This is the plastic model. And when I say durable, it's not like some of your plastic model kits that if you build it and, you get fumbly fingers and you drop it on the ground, stuff just goes, and just shoots across the room because it's so brittle. This plastic is not like that. And these models are meant to be posed. There's poly in all the joints. And so with poly, and so once it's built up, number one, I could take it almost completely apart and put it back together. And it gave me room to go ahead and do some pretty neat modifications. So now here, after building it, I used some Mr. Surfacer to put on it because I wanted a little bit of a rougher texture. It is a pretty smooth texture when it's built up, but I used Mr. Surfacer to give it a nice rough texture. You can see in that picture a little bit better. So I did do Mr. Surfacer on the entire thing. Then I set about doing some rub spots or some wear points. In his 4-year journey, I'm sorry, my cat's doing bonkers stuff to a diorama over there, and I got to stop it. Ghosty, don't do that. Little poop, you're gonna mess that up really big. I'm very sorry. Ghost was sitting in a box with a diorama and going at it. So he's okay now. So anyway, in that 4-year journey that Carlos is on, he's going to wear that rough texture off that metal surface. And so that's why I really wanted to have this rough metal surface, that Mr. Surfacer on there, so that I could put wear points on it. So that was like the first level of weathering or detailing that I tried to build on it. Then I thought, over time, he's going to have to do some repairs to the suit. And so I just took some copper, hand hammered it, and then made these patches. And I think there's 3 on it in total. But I did some things to say, hey, this thing has been repaired over time. The next thing was I wanted to add lighting inside his suit. Now, his suit actually has 3 different lights in it. So this top one, there's like a visor. It's like his camera, and I put a backlight in the camera, so it's got this green glow, like it's a camera looking out, so he can see inside the suit. So I put that in there. I also, you see this right arm, I removed that right arm and I put a different arm on it, and I put a light in the arm. So he has one arm that actually has a light in it. I used a bunch of lead wire, and I don't know if you've done this before, to put wiring in and stuff like that. The wire, just get some copper wire, works fine. But when you use copper wire and you bend it, there's some it bends back a little bit. It doesn't stay where you do it. So lead wire, and it's used in the fly fishing industry. They use it, around a hook when they're tying a fly to give it some weight. So it's these really thin pieces of lead wire that you can get. And I just got these on Amazon, and it comes in 6 rolls, 3 different, 2 of each, 3 different thicknesses. And this stuff is great because when you bend it like this, if I bend that, it stays. There's no spring back. And so it's really easy to go ahead and make some of these little routing of the wire and making it look like, electrical conduit raceways and things like that on the outside of the suit. Again, I didn't want this stuff to look all professional. I wanted to look like he had to rewire parts of the suit along this 4-year journey. And so it should look a little bit rough. And this does a great job of it. I've got a couple of more comments here. John Hayes says, I just watched someone file the ends of a small LED light, then attach 3 fiber optics to the flat end and covered the connection with black string. Yeah, that would work great. First rule of showbiz, never work with children or animals. Very good point, John. Will said that. And then Will says, what gauge of the lead wire do you have? So that's a really good point. So it came with 3 different sizes. I think I've got all 3 of them right here. One is a 0.02 inch, or does it have millimeter? No, but it's 0.02 inch, 0.03 inch, and 0.04 inch. I mean, this is, think about pencil leads, and these are the 3 right here lined up. And let's see if I can get a picture of them here. There you go. Oh yeah, see, there you go. That one's got a sticker on it. So it's 0.8 millimeter. But I think this little set, and I want to say it was $18 on Amazon, really helpful. I've got multiples of them over the time because I use them not on everything that I build, but if there's any kind of need for something like that, boy, that's right what I go for. Because again, the no spring back is awesome. There are times where I want a hard, metal wire and stuff, and I've got other gauges of wire and that I can use that for, even some cable and stuff like that. But this stuff is fantastic. And just look up lead, I think just lead wire or fly fishing lead wire on Amazon, and you can find it, or wherever you would go to that. You know, Micro Market may even have it. Thanks, Will. No problem. So, what I was saying is, let me just go on these. I need to get back here. The other thing is there's a bunch of stuff that you can do on the Machinen Krieger to just kind of enhance it. I found that any kind of little thing that I thought I wanted to do on this, because of the plastic thickness, because of the fact that it wasn't brittle, it was really easy to drill into it, to modify it, to change it. I wasn't worried about breaking it. You know, even in these pictures, the arms and the legs are flexible. They're moving around and they're jointed at the elbows, at the shoulders, at the wrist. Sometimes they'd pop off, but it was no problem. But I found that I was able to make modifications to it very easily and very enjoyable too. Like these little, it looked like this was ready to be put there, and they just didn't do it because I made basically little like not pistons, but little actuators behind the legs to give him extra ability to walk longer distances or whatever. So worked out really good. So once I got the lighting in there, I also used it comes with some kind of plasticine to make these cables and these wires on the outside of them. You see these wires hanging off the back end of them. Well, or tubes, whatever. They didn't look that great to me. And so what I had was some metallic wire. It was like wire cable covering. And basically what I did was I took some old charging cables that have I don't know the name of it, but it's basically it's shielding that goes over your wiring. And so if you have like an old phone charger or something like that, you can cut that wire off, strip it down, and what you'll find underneath is this sheathing, this woven wire shielding cable that goes over the wire, and it's very minute. And that's what I used on, you know, replacing the tubes and stuff, and it looks a lot more natural. This is just showing the different lights that I put in. There's the 3 lights. There's the green light that is his camera. His arm has a light in it, just like a spotlight. And then there's another blue light that's kind of like on, if you think of the top part of it as his right shoulder, there's a blue light that shines down. They don't show up all that great here, but they really show up when the lighting is down. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's the blue light in there, and worked out really, really well. There's also enough room inside the Machinen Krieger for all of the resistors, all of the wiring and stuff like that. This thing, basically, it just folds open like this to go ahead and stuff that wiring in there. So again, a great model to do. Years ago, I did a Yamato, just a beautiful model from the Star Blazers Yamato, you know, big ship like this. And I hadn't really got into lighting yet, but that ship was made to be lit. It has all these things in the tower and stuff like that to go ahead and put a light in there, and it'll transfer that light up. It has these clear pieces that'll transfer that light up. But I didn't think of it until after I put it together, and I felt sad that I wasn't able to put lighting in it. This, I was able to do it even after it was built. You know, I was able to take it apart, put the lighting back in, put it back together after it was completely assembled. So it was a really, really fun model to work on. So here's just some pictures later on as I got a little bit of paint on it to start the painting process, but it goes much, much further. But before I do that, I want to go back now and show you how I started building the dome, because that was the next thing I started building. So building the dome was something that I thought of from the very start. I've got a picture. I don't know where it's at. We'll come across it, but that was what I thought about. I wanted to have a dome in the diorama. That was part of one of the design elements of it, was to have this dome. Let me get my other camera going so you can see that. So I really wanted this dome. That was part of the initial idea, that I would have this dome as their habitat. And so I had this from the very start. So to start building that, I built this little jig, and then just made these like like you would see in a bridge. I made this little cutting jig at the bottom of the jig to cut the individual pieces, and then just set them in there. So I would bend the styrene to that shape in that little jig there. And I think I want to say I made 10 of these girder beams, these curved girder beams, to go ahead and build the dome. Once they were complete, then I used a base and just whatever I had on the bench to kind of support them. And then I had to start cutting them up. It's hard to see there, but cutting them up to support the main structures of the dome. This took a while. This was not easy for me to build, but it was really fun to figure it out. One of the things that I like about diorama building is trying to challenge myself, trying to do something that I haven't done before. I think that's one of the things that makes it so fun. When you're not sure if you can do something, but you've got this wild idea, I know some folks will say, well, I'm just not going to do it. I try to not do that all the time. Sometimes I do, but most of the times I really think about it and say, no, I really want to challenge myself to do it, because it's those little bits of yes, I did it, that excitement throughout the build, where you're doing something that you haven't done before, that again helps your motivation. It helps you kind of get past those points in a diorama where you're just like, it's just not going the way I want, or I've been doing this for so long. Like right now, as a matter of fact, behind me in my painting cabinet, there's 18 figures in there for my current project that I'm working on. 18 figures is a bunch, and they all need to be painted. And to me, that is not all that exciting. To somebody that's doing 2 or 3 figures, well, maybe not, but 18 seems to me like a very daunting task. I don't find that challenging, because I've done a bunch of figures before. I think the most I've ever had in a diorama is 40. I've actually had 40 figures in it, but I would do it in little sections, like 5 at one time, 6, 3, whatever. This time though, I need to do 18. That's one of those things where if you're a diorama builder, you're just like, there's a monotonous aspect to it. So sometimes that happens. And if it's in the middle of your project, it can really slow down your project. It can really interfere with your motivation. By interjecting some of these issues, like, building this dome, building these things that I don't know, break up those 18 figures, do half of them, and then do something like this, that to me really helps me stay interested in the diorama. So I won't just set it aside for months. I don't want to do that. There's a little bit of a responsibility when I'm doing videos and stuff to finish something. And if I don't, then, people are asking why, what the heck happened? I got interested in that and you didn't finish it, which has happened. I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened. That happened with my Hand of Godzilla diorama. It's not off the books completely, but I had to set it aside because there was a problem with figures. Not this problem like I have here with figures. The problem with figures was there's not enough Japanese figures to finish that diorama unless maybe I get some printed. So that's a whole different thing. But the point is, when you're doing videos for folks, it's a little bit different than if you're just building for yourself. Now I am doing this for myself. I love building, and this is my chosen thing. But it's that there is a little bit of responsibility that gets added when you say to somebody online, hey, I'm building this now. They want to see it completed. So that's just something that's a little bit new. Hey, Will has something. I've heard the same thing about parts of builds being mundane and tank treads and tall ship rigging. Yeah, others find the zen of it pleasing. Yeah, it's a really good point. I think sometimes that can be an issue of getting into it. I find even with these figures, I find that sometimes I'll hold off and I'll do other stuff and I'll kind of push it out until I have to. And they get into it and it's not as bad as I think. Maybe I don't think I'm just going to smoke all those, 18 figures in a sitting. Not that, but you're very correct. There can be a zen point of being settled in a space that, do one figure, then the next, or in my case, I'm going to have to do 4 figures in one color pattern because they're British figures. And then I'm going to do 14 figures in another pattern because they're German and they've got a completely different set of paints that I have to use. So I think I might start with I don't know, but the point is very well taken. And it's a really good point, Will, that, find some zen in it. Try to find a way to start. I think if I start these, it's not going to be as bad as I imagine, right? Because I do get excited about painting. There are those little bits of like, oh man, that face came out great, or man, that equipment looks good, or that doesn't look good. I got to go back and do it. Whatever the case may be, it's these highs and lows that you go through in building longer projects that you try to mediate so that you don't push it to the side. That's the big deal. Not stopping. And I kind of think it like, any kind of task, even when I was just doing woodworking, at about the middle point of the task, sometimes there just becomes that uphill push. I got to do this and it's not as exciting and it's not this or that. I'm not close enough to the end so I can see the end. I'm not at the beginning so I can have all that adrenaline from starting the project. I'm right smack in the middle. Push past that and it gets better. And I just need to do that with these figures. Okay, very good. I had a teacher once tell me that once you find the flow, you're in a whole other world. Very, very good point. Sometimes that flow or flow state, when you get there, things happen that you don't expect. I try to find that. I usually find that when I'm building stuff like this. I get past the idea and the adrenaline of starting it and it starts to work. And then you're like, oh, this is going great. And then you just kind of get into that flow state. But man, there are times where you just have to get through the start. It's just that start. And that's what I'm dealing with on those 18 figures. Okay. So really good points, Will. Thank you very much. So now I started this and as I'm going through this, there's a bunch of pictures here. I mean, we're literally just going through a directory here with pictures. I'm bringing in Carlos to check scale and how it's going to work. One of the things that I tell folks is when I'm building, it's not just this constant build. There are many times where I just sit back and I'm looking. And that's where the story comes from, the narrative matures, the ideas of the next steps come from. I think there is a healthy need in a project to just sit back and think about it. That's not removing myself from the project. It's literally sitting at the bench looking at it and thinking about it. Because I think there's a different thing that happens than, going and mowing the lawn thinking about it. That's a great, way to try to figure something out, by distracting yourself from it, I think then your subconscious kicks in, or maybe you're thinking about it actively, but you can get past points, you can figure things out. But another method that I like to use is I'm literally at the bench and I'm just sitting here and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at all the parts and I'm seeing how things line up. When you can see them next to each other in scale, I think that breeds ideas, and information comes to you as well. Now, the next thing, after I had that frame up, I had to get the panels. Now, these are all the same shape. These panels that I made, these triangular panels, they're all plexi, and then those are meant to mount on there. After I mounted them on there just with glue and stuff like that, I made these little tiny brackets and stuff like that. Once I had them on there, then I figured, well, between these panels, I'm going to have some seals of some kind, like a rubberized seal. And that's what this is. Now, what I used is leather. I took some leather and cut these, strips of black leather and made those into the seals that go between the window panels. And it worked out pretty good. Now, I kind of blew past, making these. This was a complete pain in the what, making these things. If you've ever cut acrylic, and this is pretty thick acrylic, it's 1/8 inch acrylic. If you've got a table saw, that's great. That's what I used. But if you've ever tried to cut acrylic without like a table saw or a proper thing, man, it's a pain in the butt. I tried it a couple of different ways before I got on the table saw to cut all these pieces of acrylic, and it shatters. And you got to be super careful, because acrylic, when it shatters, it goes everywhere. There's a lot of like internal tension in that acrylic, and when it breaks, it flies everywhere. So anytime I'm using acrylic, I got my glasses on, and not just these glasses. I've got protective glasses that I'll use because that stuff will shatter and throw shards everywhere. I've cut my fingers on these and all kinds of stuff. So be super careful when you're working with acrylic. Okay, that's enough about the acrylic. And then I think Will had something. Artist step back. Also, a movable lamp can cast shadows. Perspective viewing gives you many looks. That's a really, really good point. Stepping back from your project, looking at it, taking it all in, looking at the things that you're going to work on next. Sometimes I'll lay stuff out. That's a really, really good point, Will. I'm sorry, that's John. That was John Hayes. That really has the ability to do it. 12 to 18 gauge and half hard or full hard copper wire should hold its shape when bent. It does. It is, and I've used it. I've got some 14 gauge copper wire, a big spool of it, as a matter of fact. And it helps to anneal it. So you can heat that copper wire up with like a torch or something like that. And then by annealing it, it bends a lot better. And then it'll hold the shape really, really nice. I did that in a couple of dioramas to make like a fuel hose, and it works great. But I would suggest annealing it if you're going to use copper wire, the heavier gauge stuff. Hey, James is here. Evening from the UK. Thanks very much, James. Really appreciate you coming in. So let's go back and look at this. After I got those on there, as I said, I went ahead and used leather for the seals. Sorry, I got to get over here. Use leather for sealing up between the panels. And then I started painting the inside of the frame itself. Now, here I'm starting to shoot some dust. You can just barely see it on the top panel here. I wanted, when you've got these domes and stuff like that, just think of glass, but it's in a desert environment and it's been compromised, and so it hasn't been cleaned, so the dust is building up. And this really played into the story, because in the diorama, I have You can kind of see it up through here. I'm trying to show, it's right in there. There's a light shining through the dome. And what is happening is Carlos is up there and he's shining that hand light through there. And he's also kind of wiping the, he's trying to wipe, I'm going to go to here, away some of the dust on there. And so to do that, what I did, what I did was I just use a little paint. So you see the blue tape that I put on there, not paint, but tape. I put some blue tape on there and then shot buff over it and then peeled it off to look like he had wiped those two areas away to see through the acrylic and see through those panels. And I think the effect worked really, really nice. Came out great. I was pretty happy with it, and it's clear. So that is about it. Except I did put some dust, and in this dust, it's actually some of the sanded grout that I use pretty much on every model. It's sanded grout that I use to dust up and further weather the dome. Okay, so I'm gonna got some comments here. Did the other full dome you did before give you ideas? Did I do another full dome? I think this is the only dome that I've done, John. I think this is it. This is the only dome I've done. So was away for 60. Hey, Bob. Hello, Bob. Thanks very much. Along with the fresh look, but a new perspective. Fantastic, Bob. I'm so glad to hear it. We need to get a phone call, sir, just to connect and see how you're doing. But yeah, John, the other full dome, I don't think I did another dome, a full dome. I'm trying to think. Did I? No, I don't think I did another one, John. This is the only one I've done. Dome with plants inside. This is the same one. This is the actual same one. So let's go back there and see the dome. Actually, it's just a cutaway view of it. So this is the dome, and then from here down, that's all subterranean from here down. So this is the same dome, just on the other side. See that? So yeah, I've only done the one dome. Down here, it's not dome. We're going to get there because we're going to look at the habitat next. No problem, John. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so that's what that is. So now we're going to look at the habitat here. And so you can see a little clearer how I worked with that. So here is how I started with the dome structure complete. Now I'm starting to look at the habitat below ground. And so what I did there was just, my pink foam, which, like to do a lot. I think that the pink foam is just one of those ubiquitous materials for diorama builders. It's so versatile that I've done it once, but since doing the pink foam, I've never really gone back to plaster, where you build up your surface or your terrain with plaster and all kinds of stuff and then coat it and all that kind of stuff. I've never gone back to that after I started working with the pink foam. It's so easy to work with. You've got to have the proper tools. But for me, because I have those tools and I've got a downdraft table and vacuum and all that kind of stuff, it's so easy to work with. If you don't have a downdraft table, number one, I should probably build a portable one for a shop vac to show people because it's very easy to do. But with a downdraft table, it takes away a lot of the negatives of using pink foam. And the biggest one is the static that builds up in pink foam, and that pink foam going everywhere if you're using a rotary tool on it, which is my preferred method of carving it. I've carved it with knives, and I still do when it's necessary. But to be able to carve pink foam with a rotary tool and a burr bit, um, I feel like I can get any terrain that I need to do. Again, supplanting some of that with a knife and stuff like that if I need hard edges. But I just love pink foam. It is so versatile that I use it on virtually every diorama. So I built the surface, and if you'll notice here in this surface, the surface is higher than the base of the dome. That's intentional. I wanted it to look like, in these 4 years or however long Emma has been in her stasis chamber, frozen, um, that has built up because that dome is supposed to be completely above ground. That glass isn't there to hold back dirt. It's there to let in light. So I worked with that to look like it's been aged and stuff. Now I have done the acrylic, but I haven't mounted them at this point because I needed access to this frame so it could be painted. There you can see the wall that I put in front of the little chamber, the little airlock that's at the back of the habitat underground. And so this is the wall that I created. Very simple. It's just styrene, but I did put a bunch of layers so that I could paint it and get some depth in that back wall. Here, I used another, just bits of styrene to make plates. I worked in the steel industry for years. I worked in software, but the software was for steel manufacturing, steel cutting, welding, all that kind of stuff. So I spent a lot of years, 20 plus years, looking at this kind of thing, girders, rivets, beaming, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, this stuff is really fun, to look at and also certainly to build. So I was able to go ahead and put these on here. I used and these aren't always that easy to find, but I used rivets from, gosh darn it, what is the name of them? That is from Meng, M-E-N-G. Meng is the company that makes these. And they're great. You can get bolt heads, you can get rivet heads, you can get all kinds of stuff. But I've found the hardest to locate are rivets because it's a rounded head. So very difficult to find. I'm almost out. But when you build like a tack-on model, they come with, this is kind of fun. This is a top plate for my tack-on M1 or Mark 1 that I'm building right now. And there's a bunch of rivets on there. And so I just keep those and you just cut them off just like you would on the Meng plate for your rivets. Yes, you can make your own semi rivets, but with like an eraser and a punch and all that kind of stuff with foil. But I like that rounded look of the rivet. It really is noticeable. So that's what I used here, and did quite a job on the girder beams and stuff like that. And this is a layering process. A lot of this stuff that you're seeing right here now, you're not going to see. You can't see it here. I mean, you can barely see parts of it because I'm going to cover it up. I don't worry about that at all. I've said this many times. I will put details in that you're not going to see, because if you should look, if you should get that angle, if you should get that interest and that engagement, so you really want to get in there and look at it, and you're just thrilled with the diorama, I don't want you to get so close that you see, oh, the detail fell apart. The detail's not there. I think that when you're thinking about detail, it's not just what you think someone's going to see. I think you need to put it all in, whether they're going to see it or not. If you ever get into a diorama and you start looking really deep into it, and then you see, and you're thrilled with it, like I said before, and you get further and further into it, it should reveal more detail. If you are standing back from the diorama, you see this cool detail that brings you in closer, then it reveals more detail, and so forth and so on, till you're just right up on it, even maybe with a magnifying glass. All of that work that you put into the diorama to get that person to look closer and closer and closer, revealing more detail every time, can be destroyed in a second if the closest point they get to, the detail fails, or it's not there, or you didn't put it there, or you just left it blank. All that good work, that you did immediately becomes null and void if your detail breaks down. So that's why I say, even if they're not going to see it, even if in the final, version of it, it's even covered, I don't skimp on it. I want it to be there. I will even put, like, on this wall right here, there's stuff on the back side of the wall that you will never ever see. You will never see it, but it's there. And I'm more comfortable with it, because one of the things a number of years ago I saw online, and as a matter of fact, it wasn't too many months ago, I saw it again. Someone restoring a Shep Payne diorama. And I'm not trying to put myself in that league. I'm just saying that someone was restoring a Shep Payne diorama, and they took it apart. I literally imagine in the future somebody taking this diorama apart to repair it, to clean it, to do whatever. And that goes back to my love of Indiana Jones. As a kid, saw Indiana Jones, loved it, got interested in archaeology, got interested in all of that, and Carter finding Tutankhamun's tomb. And it's that discovery of opening something up, or digging something up, or removing the debris of ages from something, and discovering something that you didn't know was there and you didn't see it. I always thought, as a kid growing up, that was wonderful, So I kind of look at my dioramas when I build them as hope that somebody someday, many years in the future, will be interested enough to want to restore it, and then they crack it open to restore it, and they find those details. I just think it's neat. I don't think it's a waste of time or resources. I think it is something that makes you feel better. If you want to, you don't have to, but makes you feel better about your diorama or what you're building. If you think I'm nuts, totally fine. I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm saying this is part of building dioramas. It's just part of the thing that is a joy for me. I think that's extremely enjoyable, to surprise someone by having detail where they didn't think it would be. And again, not destroying the illusion for all the work that you did because they got too close to it. So anyway, let's go back to this. Worked on all that, got that stuff in there, and building layers of detail. Now here's that wall. Here's the front side of the wall. All these greeblies are just from, different models that I've built over the years. You'll see some of the stuff that you recognize in here. And that's one of the things that I think is wonderful too. Here you can see, I want to say that I painted this multiple times. One of the things that you do, I think a lot of diorama builders do, is you'll use paint to build up to get a certain look. And I certainly did that here. I want to say that I painted this with rattle can #1, so it goes on awfully thick. Because if you've ever seen like a bridge or a steel construction, some of the detail is not as apparent because they've painted it so many times. right? They're putting this lead-based heavy paint on these bridges and these constructions and stuff like that. And so some of the detail gets dulled a bit because of the buildup of paint. I wanted to see something like that. I've seen some things that people have done and they've just shot it once and it's like, it looks great. But it's not the look I was going for. I wanted the look of something that's been painted and built up and done over time. So that's why I did it. Whether that's proper for what I'm doing here or not, I hope it is, but that's what I did. Sorry, let's get back in here. And I've got another comment down here. Mr. Skunkball says, hey, Bill, I'm in the model show today. Just wanted to stop by real quick and say you've been a big inspiration to me. And in my opinion, the best dioramas I've seen. Wow, that's so nice, Mr. Skunkballs. Thank you very much. That's really, really nice. I really appreciate that. And you're at a model show. I really wish you the best of luck. I hope you enjoy not only possibly competing and getting something, but also seeing what other people have there. That's wonderful. I did the Northwest Scale Modelers show a couple of weeks ago and had just a blast seeing what everybody else was doing. That's the inspiration a lot of times to build something new is seeing what other people do. So thank you so much. That was really, really nice of you to say. Okay, so I have got that. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm showing you where I'm weathering this stuff because weathering it and getting that stuff on there was obviously a big part. There's the inner little sanctum that shows you a little bit more of the habitat that will be built out. There is early on, if you see that black line in front, that's how I determined my terrain. Now, that's not a big deal, but I think it's important to mention that I don't like flat terrain. I always try, no matter what my terrain is doing, to have undulations. Unless you're going to the salt flats, you're rarely going to see flat, right? If you're doing an aircraft, sure. If you're doing a road, sure. But even a road has, the dips and the high point in the center. So I really try to never have just flat terrain. I think it adds interest. When I see a tank on a plank and they've just put down some Mod Podge or some white glue and they sprinkle a little bit of this and that on it to give it color, I think, what a waste. And I'm not dogging anybody for doing that. I'm saying that if you just add a little bit of undulation, a little bit of irregularity to it, I think you're going to get a little bit more interest out of it. And that's what you're trying to do. When you're building your diorama, you're just trying to make it as interesting as possible so that people are going to look at it and enjoy what they're looking at. So if you are going to do that, it doesn't take too much. If you don't have foam, even some wads of paper, a lot of folks use it's like art board where you pull it off and it's got foam on one side and it's got paper sandwiched, around it. Even using that, you can build up and then you can file it down. I would implore you to undulate your terrain just a little bit. It will add some interest to it. And I think it's going to add a little bit of realism to it as well. So that's what I'm doing here. So I've drawn that out. John Hayes has have you done a diorama in full grayscale method, monochrome, like in black and white movie and posting it just as subject matter in color only? Excuse me. I love that idea. And I've seen some people do it. As a matter of fact, Barbarossa Models, one of my favorite guys, he did it. What he did was he did a gun emplacement. and I keep forgetting the island that he lives on. He's in the UK, but it's like a artillery position, you know, looking out over the water and stuff like that. And it has a woman in color sunbathing, and then right around the corner of this gun emplacement and stuff, you know, the big cement gun emplacement, he's got two soldiers, and they're in black and white. It's such a wonderful diorama. And I saw it, like it's not new. It's been there for years, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's wonderful, and it is that grayscale, and they're in black and white, and it shows two time zones in the same place. It's such a wonderful diorama. If you haven't ever seen Barbarossa models, or if you haven't been there for a while, please go back and look at that one. That is such a wonderful aspect. Thank you, John. That's that. Yes, I've thought about it many times. I've not done it. I think it would be very interesting to do, and I've thought about doing it, but as a matter of fact, I tried to do it on my Creature from the Black Lagoon model because I love monster movies, and that was my personal favorite monster movie is the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and so it has the monster, and I did it one time, and I painted them all in color. Then I read that, you know, actually that was only done for some of the press briefings and stuff like that. They had a full guy in a suit, you know, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it was in color for press briefings. But in the movie, because it's in black and white, it was all gray. There was no color on it whatsoever. And that was important, of course, for the contrast for the black and white film to get that. So I painted it once, the standing figure you've all seen before, I think, the monster, you know, figure of the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I painted it once in color, and then I did it in gray, but I haven't finished it. But I think that would be really cool. I've got a Frankenstein, a really nice Frankenstein. He's really tall. He's not the box scale. He's a larger one. He's like 1/12 or something like that. And I'd like to do him in grayscale. I've got, well, I don't know where it's at, but I've got another Frankenstein that I did in color, but I'd like to do that in grayscale. So yeah, I do love that look, John. And then he says, I think the different terrain adds flow and movement. Very good way to put it, John. It does add flow and it does add movement. It shows that something's happened, tectonic or whatever you want to call it. Something's happened, and this was very important for me to show that you know, wind had pushed sand up against that dome and in a specific direction coming from here to there. So you'll see later on in some pictures that that's quite apparent. Okay, thanks very much. And thank you so much for commenting, folks. I really did want this to be as interactive as possible, and I do want to answer any questions that you have. So please continue with that. Okay, so let's get through here to some more. This is where I'm starting to do chipping and rusting. I only realized after the fact that it would most likely have been aluminum, not steel. But that's where we are. I did that. So maybe it's a rusting alloy. I don't know. But it most likely, if you're going on a planet here, it's most likely going to be aluminum. So there's a little bit of a misnomer there. Here's where you can see I did some depth by adding panels on this back wall. And, you know, they're not standing out a lot. It's mostly done with paint. But by having that paint there, I'm giving depth just by having the doors and the panels in a different color than the background panel. And so that's how I add depth to that. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to do that. Let's see, just painting up some of the greeblies in there. Again, a lot of this isn't going to be shown or be hard to see. And there you go. You can see where I've really weathered this stuff up. It is on an alien planet, so there's a lot of corrosion and rusting going on. Okay, here's some piping that I'm adding in there. Now, part of the story, if you remember, Emma, a biologist, scientist, she is trying to grow plants in there. And so we're going to start looking at the hydroponics next, because the hydroponics you can see over to the right of this picture, those are hydroponic tables where they're trying to grow the plants, and these are the hydroponic systems. So there's a bunch of pipes that I brought in there and stuff like that. Now this is starting to build the inside of that area where I'm gonna have it's a airtight chamber. And so what this is actually from a Dyson vacuum. That's an old Dyson vacuum piece that our old Dyson vacuum. It's, one of those hand pieces that we never used. And so my wife gave that to me. And so this is her chamber that I built out of that clear Dyson piece. And this is going to be the stasis chamber that Emma's going to be frozen in, back in the corner. And it is lit, and so you can kind of see it, how it's going to be viewed there. But that is the chamber that Emma will be in as we progress. I put a little bit of some padding back in there, and that was all just some putty that I built up and then painted. And there's the chamber, not complete, but getting pretty close. I really liked using this because that is some thick acrylic. Okay, now this, I wanted to have, how you see in sci-fi movies, there's this big panel that you can see through, but it has all that writing on it. So this is just a piece of acrylic, and at the base of it, the black part, it's almost kind of like when we were talking about the fiber optic. Same thing with acrylic. If you light one side of it, the light will flow up through that acrylic, and that's what's happening here. I went ahead and just etched in one side of the acrylic, and then made this little 3 light bar at the base of it, and that cast the light up through it, and everything that was etched on it went ahead and lit up real nice. So this is supposed to be kind of like a status board in Emma's chamber to check, what everything is. The big circle in the center is actually their living compound. It's the lower right, this chamber right here, that's where we're at in the diorama. So there's much more to the homestead, but we're only looking at this one chamber. And then I went ahead and put cross hatches on it, and then mounted it in the back wall. And I think it gives off this really nice glow as well inside there. So, and then you can see it through the window. Next, you can see the light coming from Emma's chamber, and it was too much. It was too much light because it bled throughout the entire inside chamber. And so what I needed to do was I put these baffle walls in there. If you can kind of see this with my mouse, these 2 walls on this side, and then there's one here, those are to deflect some of the light from, kind of blowing out the effect of that map. And so by putting those walls in there, that helped. But then the other thing that I needed to do, you can see there where the walls have kind of blocked some of the light, so that this is a lot more apparent. You can see it better. And there is the light in there. But I think the light was still a little bit too much, and I'm trying to see if I have the picture of it. But basically what I did was I put I basically took a very small piece of tubing and put over the light, painted it black. There is a picture in here somewhere. We'll get to it. But that then made it a spotlight, so it is only really shining on Emma. And that helped with the light bleed and illuminating the entire chamber in there because it was just too much light and I needed to, kind of chill it out. So that's what it did. This is the floor. Now, I wanted kind of a high-tech floor, and you can't quite see it here, but hopefully you can see it in this picture or this picture. What I did there was I did triangles. One of the things that I try to do in a diorama is I try to repeat things. If the triangles on the dome and then the triangular patterns of the acrylic, I brought to this floor. And that's one of those cohesive things. That's, trying to make everything look as something. Now, you can see that floor there. This is one of those details where you're not going to see it hardly ever, because later on, when I get this area, the hydroponic area, that's going to be completely obscured. You're not going to see that floor at all, but you can see it inside the chamber. But I really like that flooring idea. And again, the triangles kind of help put everything together. Excuse me. Now, one of the other things I want to bring to your attention in another one of these things that repeats itself is there are tanks of two specific colors inside that chamber where Emma is at. And so if you look to the right of this picture, there's a red tank, and above it, there's this like lime green tank. Those colors are repeated throughout the diorama in a very specific way, because those are the two chemicals that Emma is using to preserve life. It's like food. It's the thing that happens to help the plants grow. It's like these two primary chemicals that she came up with that keep everything going. So you're going to see those in other places, and that's again one of those places where I repeat these things so that they kind of add continuity. There's a better picture of it. They add continuity throughout the diorama. When we get to the hydroponics, you'll even see tubes and lines carrying that fluid to the hydroponics. Okay, so there's with the wall in place, and there's with the back wall, the terrain now that it's been cut. And there's just some more. Now there's a control panel. That's the back of that control panel. That control panel is fully lit, and there's lights that fade in, fade out. I use an Arduino for that. Here's the picture in the top of the chamber that Emma's in that shows trying to direct that light straight down. The black there, it's actually a tube that's been painted black so that the light comes straight down to control that light a little bit better over Emma so it doesn't just bleed into this entire chamber. There's that control panel again. Again, there's a bunch of lights on that you can see later on in the diorama. And then there's everything inside with all the lighting done up. And you can see here where Emma's chamber now, with that tube over the light, it's really pushing that light straight down instead of just this massive blown out effect. And so you can see the lights in there much better because of that. Now, the lights that are here on this panel, this control panel, they all do something. The red light kind of fades in and fades out like a pulsing. The green light blinks, and then the blue light, it does a pattern. And again, that was all done with an Arduino. And I actually have the code. So if anybody wants that code, I can give it to you. Here's all the wiring behind there. It took a bunch. You can see my breadboard behind it. And I got to say something here. I haven't done a lot of lighting since this. I've done lighting, but not with an Arduino where I'm controlling that lighting. If you haven't done Arduino lighting, it's very worthwhile doing. It's just, it's not complex. It's not difficult to get into. I'm not a coder, though I worked for a software company. I was in sales, It is something that anybody can pick up, and you can add so much to your diorama by using just a little. I mean, the Arduino is that big. It's just this tiny little board, and it's very simple to program, and all of the information is on arduino.com or arduino dot whatever. It's very easy to use, and I would encourage anybody that's interested in doing it, whether you've got a coding background or not. It really is fun. So there's just another picture of it with low lights. You can see how everything lit up, and controlling that light was so important on her chamber. There's also on the door. I've got lighting on the door because and here you can kind of see it, but the pictures are messed up. Here it's green right next to the door. It's right in the middle of the picture, and there it's red. And so what's happening on that doorway, you can see it here. As a matter of fact, it might work if I show you this. Sorry. I'm trying to get the camera going. I don't know if you can see this, but right there, the door has a green and red light flashing, going back and forth between green and red. You can't really, there you go. See there? It's going between green and red. Red means there's an emergency. Green means that the door and the chamber is sealed. So, Emma is safe in there. That's just one of those small little things, that you add for the story to make sure the detail matches the story, because it's flashing. If you just close the door and seal it up, it goes green and it doesn't flash in the story. If it flashes red and green, that means it is sealed, but there was an emergency. If it flashes red, that means that there's no seal. So that is just one of those little tiny details that again helps to make sure that the story and the narrative flow. Everything works together. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that you saw that, because I really enjoyed doing that part of it. And then there's all of the lighting in the diorama lit up, just on the side. And you can see the lighting on Carlos there on the left-hand side, because his hand light is actually really quite bright. There's her chamber. I needed to make it look, and I think I did okay here. Excuse me. Pardon me. But I needed to make it look like it was frozen. So that's why the blue and white paint around the edges, to make it look like she's been frozen in there. Hey, Will says, I gotta go. It's been good seeing you again, but I have to run. Talk again later. Have a great day. Thanks very much, Will. I really appreciate it. John says 3D effects are great. Foreground, middle, and background and details make the viewer part of the experience. I totally agree. Thanks very much. I appreciate that, John. It is something that I conscientiously think about in doing this stuff. I really think of how it's going to be viewed by someone. That whole, here you see a detail, you get closer, you reveal more detail. I really take that into consideration and try to make sure that's something that flows through the entire diorama. Okay, so there again supposed to be ice buildup in the chamber, and then there's Emma in the chamber. I do have other pictures of Emma, so you can see Emma. She's a Machinen Krieger figure that was given to me by the same gentleman that gave me the raccoon, which is awesome. Stephen, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And now I think we're going to start looking at the hydroponics, because the hydroponics were there's more of the ice, and I just had to do my little logo in there just for kicks and giggles. But I really like how the ice came out there when I went back and added a little bit more white to it. Okay, so that is it for the internal chamber, but now we're going to look at the habitat. Now we're going to look at hydroponics. Okay, so this has been an hour and a half. I hope it's okay with everybody that we're taking so long here. This is something you can obviously go back and view. I will post it up on the channel later on, but I'm having a great time going through this because it is one of the dioramas that I just really, really enjoy. So if you got to go, it's totally fine, of course, but know that I will post this after we're done. So now we're going to look at the hydroponic tables because I wanted to show that the hydroponics were active and this was actually working inside, and Emma did complete her mission. So I built these two. These are just scratch built out of styrene. Once I built them and got the size, this is supposed to be, you know, a much larger chamber. So there were just stacks of these hydroponics in there. We're just seeing this one corner of it. So these are in here. I'm going to see one full table, and then I'm going to see just part of the second table. And so, but I built two tables to make sure, you know, I had the basis. Then here's the plant racks in it. I don't know if anybody's familiar with hydroponics. When I was growing up in the 70s, hydroponics were like this real big deal. And so I remember reading a lot about it growing up. And so that's where, you know, this information came from. Here are the two. Basically, you have valves that allow the liquid to come down into these little hydroponic cells to feed the chemicals to the plants. Interestingly, the little valves that you see on there are modified tank tracks to make it look like this little complicated little valve, but they're actually tank tracks from Lincoln Link tank. And then the little gray pieces on the ends are landing gear, and then just some tubes. Excuse me. So then there is your completed hydroponic table with the tubes coming down, more of that lead wire I used in there. You can see. And now, after they're complete, I needed to make them look like they have been deteriorating. There's like a pump that delivers the chemicals. There is some very large gauge solder. I typically do not like to use solder in my dioramas. The reason is solders have flux, they have acid core, they have all kinds of stuff. And that flux and that acid core can start to corrode over time and bloom on the outside of your solder. And I don't want to introduce that into a diorama. This is solid core solder. So there's none of that. There's no flux. There's no acid core in that. So that's okay to use. And it was thicker and able to bend. It's not as flexible as the lead, but I didn't have anything thick enough. So now I'm trying to get to the point where I start deteriorating these, because there you go. There's one of them. The paint and stuff on these, I'm trying to make these look like they've deteriorated over a lot of time. And so I just tore the heck out of these with my Dremel, and looked like they were corroded. They were eaten up by the atmosphere. They were eaten up by the chemicals. They were just literally falling apart. I went over every square inch of these things with the Dremel to make it look like the metal had really corroded and really pitted and really deteriorated. And then the plastic, I even went over the plastic, but it had a different kind of deterioration. There's where I started using rust, because these were metal, and made these trays, you know, that hold the water and recirculate the water, make it look really rough. Same thing with the plastic. And then I even made it so the legs were buckling underneath. And in the final diorama, you'll see that those legs have buckled under the hydroponic tables themselves. I was really happy with the the deterioration of these. That was a major point that I wanted to make. Now, I'm going to see. You see this in the corner, this right here, This is supposed to be sand and soil coming in from outside. And there's better pictures of that as we go. But that's supposed to have flowed in from outside. And of course, it's just some pink foam. And then later on, I put some sanded grout on it. But the effect is supposed to show that through the dome deterioration and the breach, it's allowing some of the planetary soils and things like that to come into the hydroponic lab. There it is, pardon me, with some sanded grout on it. And then once that was done, I started building plants. And now these plants are on some masking material that my friend Tim cut for me. And these are all these are leftovers actually from my Tarawa diorama that I did years ago. And so I use those plants and built these up. And basically what I do is I take these off. There is a little bit of a sticky to the back of that, but I'll glue those onto fine wire. And then I'll go ahead and paint them different colors for the different plant types, the different leaves and stuff like that, even some variegated leaves and stuff like that. And then I place those in the diorama. And then after they were all nice and pretty, I made them wilted. Here is the growth that I'm building. And I did this with, this is felt. Leslie, my wife, Mrs. Modelcraft, what she does is she does felting. And so she gave me some felt, and I used felt to make this kind of I guess, like an algae or something like that. And so that's what we're looking at here is some algae that is starting to grow. And that is a combination of these chemicals that Emma has created and the elements from the planet. And so lots of different colors here to try to make it look right. There I've got my final colors. And then after that, what I did is I started stringing it up. So this algae material, this plant life is starting to grow and propagate inside of the dome. There's more plants. And here's some of that felt that I put out into a sheet and tried to make it look like it's hanging. Now here you can see these are the chemical lines, the feeder lines that are coming out to the hydroponics. And you remember what I said earlier about the two colors that are being repeated, that lime green color and the red. I've repeated those colors to those lines feeding the hydroponics. And that's just one of those points where I want to continue to make sure that I'm using the same colors to represent what it is. So just continuity of those colors coming through there. I have more than the lines that are going there because I want to show that there are more hydroponics that are out of view, but these basically go around the perimeter. That's that lead wire too. That has to be painted prior to being installed. So there it's looking pretty close, but I wanted to show some kind of a reaction. There's the actual kits that I got. This is like a flowering element that is being created on the planet because of its atmosphere. There's 3 of those eventually that are put up in there. But again, I wanted to show it growing something. So what I'm using here are mustard seeds. These are mustard seeds that I painted purple. And mustard seeds are fantastic. I use them for fruits at scale in my dioramas. If I want to show oranges or apples, apples are red, oranges are orange, and lemons are yellow. And so mustard seeds are great for that because there's these little tiny balls, but they have a specific shape and it's not completely round. So it has a little bit of a there's like a top and a bottom to it, and you can tell. And so it looks like a piece of fruit. So use mustard seeds if you're trying to do fruit in your diorama. So these then get placed all over. You can't quite see them. There's a picture here that you can see them much better. There you go. So you can see that they're purple, but after I glued them on, then I put a little daub of white to make them look like a plant that's growing and producing some kind of food or fruit in the atmosphere. And there you can see it on that. Now this, excuse me, this is where I pretty much completely obliterate my floor, but I wanted to show a chemical reaction. So I've got, some sand on the floor there. And then over here, you see these loops, this loop here of that. I'm going to create two little pools in there of the chemical. Now, this is just more of the plant going in and out of the, growing actually on the outside of the dome. But I'm trying to get to these pools. There's some more of the fruits that are growing inside, these alien fruits that basically created by Emma. But I think we're going to start showing the pools. Now, in these pools, I wanted to show some kind of reaction. And so what I did was, there's the mustard seeds. I didn't want to use the mustard seeds. There you can see the mustard seeds a little closer. They're not completely round, so they do look like fruit if you paint them. There's some nice tight shots of the alien fruit growing. I'm not showing the reaction I'm wanting to show. Sorry. We are going to now look at, I think, surface prep. No, I'm sorry. Let's go back and we're going to look at Emma. We're going to come back to that. We've only got a few pictures of Emma here, but I just wanted to show you Emma. This is the Emma figure in the stasis area. There she is. Great figure, by the way, 1/20th scale. This entire diorama is 1/20th scale. Pardon me. There she is painted, and she's supposed to be frozen. So that's why the coloring we have here. I painted her fully, and then I just did really, really light coats of white over and over and over to get this kind of I'm frozen look. And then she goes in her chamber, and then that's how she is. Hey, thanks, Bob. Really appreciate you coming in, sir. And we're going to set up a phone call. We'll set up a phone call. I don't know what you're doing this weekend, but maybe tomorrow I'll send you an email and see if we can get a phone call together. Thanks very much for coming in, Bob. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks very much. So that's it for Emma. Now I want to show you, I think it's surface prep that is going to show you what I want. Pardon me. Sorry, we haven't looked at Ichiro fully, but we'll see him here. So in surface prep, now I've got Ichiro all built up. Here he is on the outside. And basically what I'm showing here is Ichiro and Carlos, finally coming to the dome and inquiring to see if, Emma is around or any idea if she's around. I want to get to a point. You can see I've done a lot of weathering, and I'll go back and explain some of the weathering that I did on Carlos. He's walking for 4 years in a desert planet, and so that's why I wanted to show all of this wear. This is a strap that he has that connects him to Ichiro when they're walking. On top of him, it's just completely gone down and burned away because of the beating sun has just completely burned away any paint that's on top there. So some very, very heavy weathering on all of his top surfaces. You can see there. Now, see that tank? That tank is there's another one right in front of it that is that yellowish green color, that lime green color, and that's a red tank. So that is the fuel that has fueled both Carlos and Ichiro on this journey. of 4 years. They didn't have a lot of stuff. Here, on top of his baggage, I don't know, you can't quite see it, but there's a brown box there, and that has scratched onto it Emma, the name of his wife. He's got some spare parts in here. He's got a tarp. There you can see Emma scratched on that back. Until this point, he has no remnants or nothing left of Emma except for what he's got inside that little box. And so that's something that on this 4-year journey, he has continued to go back to. There's a little solar panel on top. That's partially what powers Ichiro on their journey. And then there's just some prep work that I did trying to get the surface to look right. There's some tools. I've got some more pictures about how I prep the surface here. I'm trying to get there. Here are some more pictures. These are some of the external things. Pardon me, I'm sorry. External things that were outside the dome in the dirt. To include this. This is like a little CO2 cartridge. Cut that up and made it into an O2 tank that I'm going to mount. I'll paint and mount on the outside. You can see it. Trying again to show that, this dirt and stuff has blown in over time and has risen up higher. So that actually, wasn't buried previously. It is buried now. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to show there. The other thing is you see this little blue rag? This little blue rag has been tied outside to the dome. And that's how this dust has been removed, because the wind has made this go back and forth over years. And so that's why there's a clear spot in the dome there. Some more just flotsam basically on the ground there before I put in Ichiro and Carlos. Pardon me. And there is the tank after I did a repaint on it and remounted it in there. I wanted a different color instead of the red. I thought there was too much red because I had used the red in other places. And then there's a port, just some flotsam, more ground prep. Trying to show them walking through. I wanted to have the ground look like it's being disturbed, not they're just walking on it. It's rock hard. I wanted the sand and the stuff to be disturbed by their walking and coming in. Okay, there's that. And then I still have some pictures of Ichiro. Oh, here's some studio shots, some higher end shots. So there you can really see the lighting on Carlos. This is before he was fully weathered and stuff like that. But this was the lighting that I did for the diorama. You can see his hand really does cast a lot of light into the diorama. There's just some more of these are tie downs. Here's the completed diorama, and you can see where the hydroponics, I want to see if I can show you where the hydroponics have kind of broken down a little bit. Pardon me. Sorry, I'm talking so long. I'm getting a little bit stuff in my throat. There's more pictures of Ichiro. Ichiro has a lot of detail on him. There's a lot of very minute things that you can see. There's basically a throttle on Ichiro to make him go faster or slower on the front, and how they move through the desert. At one point, Ichiro had to be disassembled and then reassembled because they came. There you go. There's some plants to show how the plants have kind of died and wilted through the hydroponics. But Ichiro had to be taken apart and then reassembled after Carlos came upon a very deep ravine that they couldn't walk down. And so he had to take Ichiro apart and then put him back together. And in doing so, he wasn't sure if Ichiro would actually fire back up. And so that's just one of those things in the storyline that as I was building that story, I wanted to have some drama. And of course, as Ichiro has become sentient and basically Carlos's son, I wanted to show that, you know, there was a point in which, you know, they made the decision. There's no other way to get past this massive ravine, almost like a Grand Canyon. And the only way to get across was him to take Ichiro apart, pack him onto his back, go down, make 2 trips, and then reassemble him on the other side of this massive crevasse. And he doesn't know if Ichiro will come back and if Ichiro will come back to life. So it's basically him saying goodbye to his son, going down into it, and then reviving his son on the other side of this deep canyon. So it's things like that, you know, while I'm building and telling the story to myself, creating the story to myself, that again made the building of this diorama so special and so I guess personal to me, because this journey, this amazing 4-year journey, because he has no way of getting there, of finding Emma, other than walking. He literally had to walk for 4 years to find Emma, and he does, and finally they do meet, and that is the culmination of the diorama. So there you go, folks. That is it. That is the story of Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro. Now, there's more stories. There's more to the story, and the plan is, of course, to write this story and even have a little book that you can download. You know, either in PDF form or actually even in a little, almost like a comic of Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, because there's lots of stories. There's 2 points where Carlos and Ichiro meet a bad guy, and this bad guy, because it's not a completely desolate planet. You know, other people have tried to you know, colonize there, but it's so vast that, you know, they have massive tracts of land, hectares of land that they're on. Well, this guy, they meet him, and he wants what Carlos has, and so they battle, they fight, and in the end, Carlos takes this guy out. Then, like a year later, Carlos is coming, and he walks up onto a homestead, and I'll leave that story for later. But this homestead that he walks up on, he almost gives up his search for Emma, and I'll leave it there because I think it's a very compelling story, and I want to write it. I want to write this story. I want to get it on paper, and I want to have it so that people can download it and read it, because I think it's a very fun story, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So if anybody has any questions or anybody has any other comments, please say them now, because I think we're just about done. It has been 2 hours, so it's been a heck of a live stream, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you come up with some questions, or if you're looking at this later on and you have questions, please ask. I'd love to answer them. And if not, we're going to say goodbye. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate you taking a look at this. There are build videos. There's a whole playlist